Greetings, Singularitarians, to our readings of The Singularity is Near. We are going to talk today about the 6 epochs of the development towards the singularity. And let's just not lose too much time and dive directly into the topic. So we finally see here the 6 epochs. You can clearly see here this line that is waving up to the singularity, and it actually represents an exponential curve, while the exponential curve in an empirical world slows down at some point and then is taken up by another invention and speeds up again in a new exponential wave. We have 6 epochs. We can explain them. These are the 6 epochs of what Kurzweil sees as evolution, and it works through so-called indirection. That means it creates a capability and then uses the capability to evolve to the next stage. I don't know if the capability is directly inherent in each of these developments, but it is rather taken up when it slows down by a new invention, by a new biological mechanism that just evolved on top of something that happened earlier. Now, I'm not entirely sure why he calls it indirection. My assumption is that the new technology or the new stage of evolution cannot be foreseen in the former movement. Let's read a little bit what he has to say about these 6 epochs. So he says, evolution is a process of creating patterns of increasing order. That is certainly controversial. There are also evolutionary processes where there is no pattern of increased order, where an organism just survives because it's maybe simpler, right? We're not necessarily going into the direction of more order. But he says, I believe that it's the evolution of patterns that constitutes the ultimate story of our world. And of course, he discusses that in terms of a storyline. And the storyline is written towards the singularity. And I think in that respect, we can indeed talk about patterns of increasing order. He then discusses the different epochs. Well, let's look at that again. First, we have physics and chemistry. And it technically means that information is stored in atomic structures. And these information are really important because as soon as DNA involves, the information is now stored in biological organisms. And once brains evolved, information got stored in neural patterns. And while technology has emerged during the last, let's say, 1,000 years, maybe 2,000 years, I'm not sure. This is probably the last 100 years. Information was stored in hardware and software designs. And now we are getting to Epoch 5, which is the great merger of technology and human intelligence. It may have already started, and it technically means that the methods of biology get integrated into the human technology base, which then opens an entirely new horizon where intelligence gets infused into any kind of matter that is out there in the universe. And that is what Ray Kurzweil calls the universe waking up. Yay. Okay, let's look at Epoch 1 in more detail. I'm really not a physicist, so I cannot say much about it, but he says we can trace to a state that represents information in its basic structure, patterns of matter and energy. So information is stored in a certain sense, namely in patterns of matter and energy. And then he talks about quantum theories that hold that time and space are broken down into discrete quanta, especially fragments of information. Now, it's not really so important whether the atomic nature is analog or digital, so he doesn't want to get into this debate, but he wants to say that we know that atomic structures store and represent discrete information. What exactly happened? Well, we had the Big Bang, right? And atoms formed, then electrons became trapped in orbits around nuclei nuclei consisting of protons and neutrons. Well, I'm not entirely sure about this story. Like, again, I'm not a physicist or a chemist. So this is the story that I just accept here, and it's told in a fairly simple way, right? The more interesting thing is that the rules of the universe and the balance of the physical constants that govern the interaction of basic forces are so exquisitely, delicately, and exactly appropriate for the codification and evolution of information that one wonders how such an extraordinarily unlikely situation came about. And there we often have the argument, well, only a god could have done that. And Ray Kurzweil looks at that differently, where some see a divine hand, others see our own hands. Namely, the anthropic principle which holds that only in a universe that allowed our own evolution would we be here to ask such questions. Now, what is the anthropic principle? I'm not entirely sure. If you know that in more detail and are more informed about that, please inform me in the comments. But to me, anthropos means humans, right? So to me, it seems to mean that we wonder about why is everything around here and why can it be so perfect? And we can only ask that question because we have been developed on top of these conditions. And there may have been already billions, trillions, quadrillions, or whatever number of universes where nothing happened. And so to us, the chance appears so incredibly small that in such a universe, as we know our universe, a life form such as humans develops. But if there's an infinite amount of creations of universes, then it is very likely that a life form like ours develops. We just don't have insights into parallel universes. And so this is also what he discusses here. Recent theories of physics concerning multiple universes speculate that new universes are created on a regular basis, each with its own unique rules, but that most of these either die out quickly or else continue with the evolution without the evolution of any interesting patterns, because their rules do not support the evolution of increasingly complex forms. And of course, he says here we cannot test these theories, but it's clear that the physical laws of our universe are precisely what they need to be to allow for the evolution of increasing levels of order and complexity. So if I understand him here correctly, he doesn't answer the question whether there are multiple universes or not. It's just like we are here. We don't know if it's a coincidence or a divine hand. We could imagine a god. We could also imagine multiple universes, billions of universes, and we cannot test these theories. But we have to accept that the conditions we find in this universe are the conditions that determine our lives. That's how I understand him. And then we get to these different epochs that we now try to understand. Epoch 2, biology and DNA. So here, carbon-based compounds became more and more intricate, and complex aggregations of molecules formed self-replicating mechanisms, and life originated. Biological systems evolved a precise digital mechanism to store information describing a larger society of molecules. And this enabled to record the evolutionary experiments. So everything for Kurzweil is how do information get stored? And the process of storing information gets increasingly powerful. Epoch 3, here we see another instance of this new power that is gained. Each epoch continues the evolution of information through a paradigm shift to a further level of indirection. So this is because these S-curves or these exponential growths slow down. They slow down, become S-curves, but then it's one S-curve feeding into another S-curve. And this is what he calls the level or the development of indirection. And here he says also, that is, evolution uses the results of one epoch to create the next. For example, in the third epoch, DNA-guided evolution produced organisms that could detect information with their own sensory organs and process and store that information in their own brains and nervous systems. So the third epoch of information processing mechanisms is about brains and nervous systems. Our own species evolved the ability to create abstract mental models. So this is the next step, right? It's not just brains, but we now also produce mental models and contemplate on the rational implications of these models, which is a condition for developing technology. But the other important point is not just our rational and abstract thought, but also our opposable thumb. This is always pointed out as a very important aspect, because here we can really start manipulating the environment in very intricate ways, in very detailed ways. And so we can actually build elaborate automata, ultimately with sophisticated computational and communication devices. Technology was itself capable of sensing, storing, and evaluating elaborate patterns of information. So this is where we are now. And from all of these observations, he draws a logarithmic plot of events. And we see here we have two time scales. We have the time scale that represents the years before our present. So 10 to the power of 10, if I'm not mistaken, is 10 billion years ago. 10 to the power of 9 is a billion years ago. Okay. And then we have here these events that we put on this x. We discuss them in a minute. And then we have the y-axis, where we have the time to the next event, which is also logarithmic. And we see here like the time, well, it's a very similar scale, right? The time to the next event actually also decreases. And this gives us overall this need, if we put these events on this diagram, or on this coordinate system, we get this neat straight line downwards, which is a countdown to singularity. So here on the bottom, there's the singularity waiting for us. And where did it all start? Well, I guess, okay, if this is 10 billion years, I guess that's 5 billion years ago. Possibly, it's like about on the half, maybe 3 billion years ago, life developed. And once life developed, it was about 3 billion years. I know we had eukaryotic cells. Now, I don't know what that is. I guess this is more complex organisms that have their own cell core and different mechanisms to reproduce and so on. I guess, how do you call them? We call them amöben, amöbia. I don't know how you call them in English, unfortunately. So, but it's like simple organisms that develop, and at some point they actually combine with each other, become multicellular organisms, and then it takes a very long time again. I guess now it's like 10 to the power of 9, about something like 500 million years, 670, 700, 800 million years. Oh wait, I have to be correct here. Okay, no, billion, so this is 10 to the power of 8, so that's then 100 million years, right? So I guess it takes 800 million years. Something like that, I believe. I mean, please correct me if I'm wrong, but this should be right. And then we have the development of reptiles. That must be dinosaurs, right? 500 million years ago, sounds about right. Dinosaurs have been around pretty long time, I believe. Okay, I'm not very knowledgeable on that. Before we also had the Cambrian explosion, where plants basically developed. Body plants? I don't know what he means by that. So, okay, this is maybe where you know it better, so write it in the comments if you know it better. What did actually develop? I guess he means plants, but Cambrian explosion body plans. I don't really know what he means by that. Maybe we look later into that in more detail. At some point, however, then humans developed. We had the human ancestors, and then it took a pretty long time. So we see here that was about 5 million years ago, and then it took another 4,900,000 years until the Homo sapiens sapiens developed. So this was like 100,000 years ago, and you can also see here how long that took. And finally, then we start developing art and early cities about 10,000 to 15,000 years ago. We get agriculture about 10,000 years ago, city-states about 5,000 years ago, I believe, and then you see it goes faster and faster. And that's what he describes. You can also see that on a not so logarithmic scale, I would say. And then we see actually the logarithmic curve. Though I'm not entirely sure, because here, see, it's like 0 to a billion years. This is a billion years. And then we go up to 4 times a billion years, and you see how quickly that developed. So this is what he calls a linear plot. Because 0, 1 billion, 2 billion, 3 billion, 4 billion years. So it's a linear plot. While this here is still logarithmical. That is the time that it takes to the next event. Okay, how does he know this? Well, there was obviously somebody like, I guess, Modis, who collected all these events from different researchers, different sources, and they all seem very much to agree about this time of scales, this time frame of how the events happened. Now, this may be not so important. We can also look at the canonical milestones, again, on a logarithmic plot, but let's read a little bit more. So the attributes that are grown exponentially in these charts are order and complexity. So I agree with that. It's maybe not necessarily for evolution, but if we look for a plot towards singularity and a plot towards human beings and their use of machines, we could probably describe it as grown complexity and order. So, and then he says again what I already have said. A billion years ago, not much happened over the course of even 1 million years, but a 250,000 years ago, epochal events such as the evolution of our species occurred in time frames of just 100,000 years. In technology, if we go back 50,000 years, not much happened over a 1,000-year period, but then in the recent past, we see new paradigms such as the World Wide Web progress from inception to mass adoption within only a decade. So it gets faster and faster of how we develop until like the singularity appears, and then for a human mind it will occur just like a moment in time, while probably the enhanced thinking power in the singularity will make it appear much more distinguishable. Nevertheless, right now we are at the merger of human technology with human intelligence, and that is where he just looks ahead several decades. And the singularity will result from the merger of the vast knowledge embedded in our own brains with the vastly greater capacity, speed, and knowledge sharing abilities of our technology. So the singularity will then allow us to overcome age-old human problems and vastly amplify human creativity. So he does not speak much about the merger here, but he says that the human-machine civilization will transcend the brain's limitations. Okay, and then finally we arrive at the sixth epoch, which he says the universe wakes up with human beings, or maybe with brains. The universe has opened an eye, and now we are like happily announcing the arrival of the universe, similar to a gigantic calculating machine, a gigantic brain that thinks itself. And that is what Ray Kurzweil says is the intelligent destiny of the cosmos. So it means that he clearly defends the teleology. I don't know whether that is true. I mean, let's think of the Fermi paradox. the Fermi paradox says, why do we never contact aliens, even though the probability of other life in the cosmos should be so high? And the answer is usually, or some people answer that there is possibly a great filter, that once other civilizations reach our stage, they just always kill themselves, or there's an event that prevents them from making it to the next step. So it is not necessarily teleologically. Maybe all the development just develops always towards an apocalypse. Maybe our development is self-destructive. Could also be a possibility. So Ray Kurzweil is certainly a bit optimistic here. He thinks that in the aftermath of the singularity, so that's when machines are ultimately smarter than humans and just start improving themselves with an unforeseen or never seen power and capability. So in the aftermath of the singularity, intelligence derived from its biological origins in human brains and its technological origins in human ingenuity will begin to saturate the matter and energy in its midst. It will achieve this by reorganizing matter and energy to provide an optimal level of computation. So the whole universe will be reorganized to become a gigantic, universal thinking machine, whatever it does. And it reminds me of Solaris from Stanisław Lem. There's this planet Solaris that is discovered, and pretty often people say, oh yeah, this planet is intelligent and it was a former life form like us that decided to turn itself in this intelligent machine. If you read the book, Stanisław Lem has a way darker message. He says technically that if we discover something that is intelligent, we probably cannot understand it. And the psychologically devastating situation in that movie is that generations of scientists have went there, have been killed by strange, unpredictable phenomena of what they perceive as an intelligent mass surrounding the planet Solaris. And they tried to interpret it, and there were libraries filled with theories on the planet of Solaris. Generations of scientists have wasted their scientific career there because they couldn't make any progress in saying what it was. And just one theory was the idea that it's a gigantic calculating machine. But we can use this theory from the book and say, well, are we really going to turn the universe into a gigantic calculable organism? Is beauty just a part of this instrumental goal that the universe just thinks itself? What happens to individuality? So this is a question, whether that can be the ultimate destiny of the singularity and of the universe. We should finish here. If you have an idea what the singularity looks like, let me also know that in the comments. And then do all the other stuff that all the other people always ask. Help me grow. Subscribe the channel. Give me a like. Hit the bell so that you get informed on YouTube whenever I post a new video. And also look up my other channels like my Instagram, my Facebook page, and so on. And please contact me if you want to study this book together. Thank you very much. And I finish with this kitschy saying of the Vulcans from Star Trek. I just like it. Live long and prosper.